Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take another look at HTML. This video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on the introduction to HTML and CSS. And specifically, we are going to look at the A tag, or again at the A tag rather. In an earlier video, I showed you how you can link documents together using the href attribute of the A tag. And we also saw how we can use the href attribute to point to remote resources such as a Wikipedia page. In this video, we're going to take this a little further and we're going to look at a couple of other possibilities, including pointing to other types of files besides HTML files. Now, there will still be a lot of different examples that we can look at, and we'll need to do this in other videos. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a sampling of some of the possibilities that you can do with the A tag. Now, much like in earlier videos, we're going to go ahead and start off with an HTML file. You can append one of your earlier HTML files if you want to. And again, I'm using the template here. I'm just going to add an H1 tag here, and I'm just going to call this some more examples of hyperlinks. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at some examples of linking to another resource on your local computer. But this time around, though, that resource rather is not going to be an HTML file. Now, if you had been following along with one of the earlier videos, you probably saw the images subfolder when we created the subcategory subfolder. And in that images folder, you'll see a couple of images here that I would then like to use as targets for our A tag. Now, before I go any further, I want to take just a second to introduce Scream. Scream is my cat that you've probably heard in one of my earlier videos. And so rather than re-record a video just because he decided to start talking, I figured I'd just fully embrace this and use him as a demonstration in this class. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a hyperlink now that we can open the picture of Scream in our web browser. And to do that, we can simply, again, use an A tag, and we'll have our href attribute. And what we can do is we can simply reference that path to the subfolder to the file using both the file name and the file extension. So you'll notice here that is images and then scream.jpg. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can go about doing this. You'll notice that if I start with the equals and then the double quotes, Visual Studio allows for us to pick a URL. That is sort of cheating. If your IDE does not support that, then what you will need to do is you'll simply need to type in the images folder name as well as the name of the file. And so in this case, we're going to select scream.jpg, and we are going to have a friendly name for this hyperlink. In this case, it's going to be just simply Scream. And then we're going to follow it up with our BR tag because we already kind of know that we are going to have more examples. So we're going to go ahead and save this one. I'm going to come out here to my browser. I'm going to go back up to my folder here, to my parent folder, and there is my sample_6.html. And you can see here that there is our header, and in fact, there's our link to the Scream. And if I click on the hyperlink, you can see you have the picture now of Scream being displayed in the web browser. Now, let's take this a step further. You'll notice that I didn't really have any indication of what I was clicking on. Sure, you could right-click, and depending on your browser, you could copy the link address into Notepad. You could save the link address as a file, or you could simply inspect the element or look at all the code behind on the page. But that is a little bit discomforting, if you would, for your end user, and that might not be what you want to have happen. In other words, maybe what we would like to have is a thumbnail that shows you what, in fact, you are clicking on. You can sort of think of this as the thumbnails that might be in Facebook Marketplace for an ad, or eBay, or something along those lines. And so what we will do is we will now make a hyperlink that uses an image instead of text. We're again going to use the image of Scream. So we'll start off first with an href, and we still want the target to be the same thing. This time around, I'm just going to go ahead and type it in. So we'll have a scream.jpg. And Instead, though, of this text, what I'm going to use is I'm going to do another tag. I'm going to do an IMG tag. We'll cover an IMG tag a little later on in another video. I think you can guess that it is an image tag. And the most important attributes that we want to include here are going to be the source, because that tells us what we're going to use as the source of the image. And in this case, what we're going to do is we are again still going to go ahead and use the images/scream.jpg file as the source for the image. And we also would like to include an alternate text should that image not in fact show up. So in this case, I'm going to put in scream.jpg. This also plays a little bit into making your site accessible. And then we're going to leave this here for right now, and we're going to see what the default behavior is for including an image in a hyperlink, and then we may come back and modify this. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my browser, I'm going to refresh, and you'll notice that this whole image now has become a hyperlink. And that's probably not quite what we had in mind. Instead of having the whole image being the hyperlink or the full size image, what we would instead like to do is we'd like to have a smaller version of Scream. And what we can do is we can come out here and we can take a look at the image itself by simply right-clicking, going to the properties of the image to see what size the original image is. And you'll have to help me remember some of this here. This is going to be 1512 by 2016. And the idea here is that I do not want to have a full-size image of Scream. Instead, what I would like to have is I'd like to have some reduced size. And so what we're going to do is we're going to specify a smaller size, let's say 1/10 of the size. So maybe what we will do is we'll try having a 150 by 200, essentially a thumbnail picture of Scream for the hyperlink. So we'll come back over here, we'll go over to Visual Studio, and then what we will do is we will simply specify, then I go ahead and specify the height. I'm going to go ahead and specify this as 200, and then the width equal to 150. And if I've got the orientation correct, if I save this and I come back over here and I simply refresh this, then you'll see that I have maintained the aspect ratio pretty well. And if I click on here, that you can then go to the full size picture of Scream. Now, again, there's a couple of different options here. There are actually other things that you can include. You can have buttons that will take you to pages as well. But again, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on those in later videos. Instead, what we want to do is we want to sort of take a look at a general overview of what all the HTML tag is capable of. And in this case, what we want to do is we can see here now we have the href attribute. We also have the ability to specify in the href attribute, we can specify, in addition to URLs, we can also do things like including mailto. So in other words, what we can do is we can include my email address in a hyperlink behind the text that says, email me if you have any questions. And it's pretty straightforward to go about doing this. I have and will leave the links in the description of this video for some more advanced features. But what we're going to do is we're going to focus on just this simple example where we use inside the href attribute, the mailto attribute followed by the colon and the email address for the end user. Now, if you noticed in an earlier video when we were taking a look at the syllabus, that is actually how I've included those hyperlinks. So you can also go back and take a look at that if you would like to. But let's go ahead and include this now in our sample here. What we'll want to do is after this A tag, we are again going to sort of abuse our BR tag a little bit. We're going to go ahead and add it here under the A tag. And we'll simply add now one more. And again, we'll have our href. We're going to have a mailto. In this case, I'm going to use my gmyers@uab.edu. And I'm going to follow this up with, please send any questions to, and actually what we're going to do is we're going to play around with this just a little bit. I'm going to start with this text. but I'm going to do this one twice just so you can see some options. And what we'll do here is we'll copy and paste this one, and I'm going to move part of this text out of the hyperlink itself. And so I'm going to put this here, and now this time around, I'm actually going to go ahead and add a P tag, and I'm going to move the A tag inside. And then the exclamation point, we're going to have some fun with this. We're going to have several of them again, just to really reinforce the differences between these two. And we'll save this. And I think we probably need a BR tag here as well. Again, we are kind of abusing the BR tag a little bit, but this is just for the purposes of seeing then how this particular tag works. So we'll go ahead and refresh this, and you can see here that in the first example, I have the please send any questions to me. The entire thing is a hyperlink. If I click on it, you'll see that it actually is prompting my computer to open which client I use. Again, you can just pick which client. I could pick, for instance, my Outlook email. This is going to take just a second to load. And it's actually taking a little too long, so I'm just going to go ahead and close this. But what you would do is you end up launching your default mail client, or whichever client you wanted to use. And in this case, it's going to accomplish the exact same thing. And again, because it's taking a little long to load, we will just assume then that our default mail client is correctly wired up. Let me try this one more time, because I would actually like to have you see this. I'm not really sure why this is doing this, why this is taking so long. It's trying to relaunch the wizard. 1 second on this. This should not, in fact, be doing this. Let me go ahead and launch my mail client. We'll try this one more time. This is just one of those strange things. I'm not really sure why Windows 11 is doing this. It's not, in fact, launching Outlook like it should. Let me just a second here. I may pause this video if this takes too long, because again, for some reason, it's not wanting to do this correctly. So yes, I'm going to go ahead and pause this video just so I can get this wired up correctly. And then we'll come back in just a second once I have my mail client behaving correctly. All right, so we're back. That was a little bit of a strange behavior. It looks like there was an update to Windows that I didn't see that had caused my default mail client to change. So now this one should work correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the hyperlink, and you'll see that, in fact, what I do get is my default mail client. And you can see that it's went ahead and populated the address, the send to address, with my email address. Now, let's say you want to take this just a step further, and it turns out that you can, because there are some additional features in the mailto protocol, and I'll leave both of these links for you in the description. But it turns out that you can also have the subject, body, CC, and BCC. Now, it turns out this gets pretty sophisticated pretty quick. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to focus on the subject. That one's pretty easy. So we'll come back here to our HTML again one more time. Doesn't really matter which one of these links that you use, but since the second one does look a little bit nicer here, and it also includes the paragraph tag, we're going to go ahead and copy this, and we're going to follow this up then with a question mark, and the subject equals, and then in this case, I'm going to simply put in EE 447. And we're going to go ahead and save this. And then now, if we don't have any problems here, we can come back to our page one more time, our sample 06. We're going to refresh this. And now when you click on the link, you should see the email address populated as well as the subject. And as I mentioned, this one can get pretty sophisticated pretty quick. One of the other links I can provide for you shows you how you can include the CC, the BCC, and then you can even go so far as to put the body of the email in the hyperlink. So again, this does get pretty complicated. Now, Back to the W3 Schools site here, we want to take a look not only at the URL and the href, let's take a look at some of the other attributes. And you'll notice that you have, for instance, the ability to download a file. I can't really easily demonstrate that in this video because it turns out that that file has to reside on the same resource as the page. If we get a chance to, once we get our Apache web server or IIS web server set up, I will show you how to go about doing that. But this is how you would go about allowing them to download an image by clicking on a link. There are a couple of other ways to go about doing this, but the other one that is pretty useful is the target attribute. And the target attribute allows for you to control the behavior of what happens when the user clicks on the link. In addition to the address that you are sending the user to, you can also have, for instance, the browser open a new tab. And you can see that there's several options here. Parent will open the link document in the parent frame. That's what you're most common or most familiar with, as well as self. But let's focus on how the blank works and how we would go about doing this. So again, we're going to be using the target attribute. Let's go back here one more time to our HTML. And this time, let's go ahead and borrow our second version of Scream. In other words, the one that actually had the hyperlink as an image. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to add then the target equal to blank feature on this. And if we save this, you'll see that we get a second version of our iconic Scream here. And we click on this one, and you'll notice that it has now opened Scream in a new tab in your web browser. And again, there's all sorts of different behaviors, different varieties, different reasons, I guess you could say, for why you would go about doing this. These were just meant to be a little bit of a sample. I will do some additional follow-up videos and some more sophisticated examples, but hopefully you found this video useful. And just with a parting thought, if you ever do happen to have a cat show up with your porch at 12:30 at night, screaming his head off, it is probably not a good idea to name him Scream, because he will, in fact, live up to his name. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you've got any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.